The XY Advisor podcast is intended for professional financial advisors. This content is created in partnership with our sponsor, Netwealth Investments Limited, ABN 85090 569 109, AFSL 230975, and is limited to publicly available information. Before acting on any general advice, you should consider whether appropriate and obtain financial advice from a qualified financial advisor. XY Advisor does not hold an AFS license and does not provide any financial advice or services or endorse any general advice. If a PDS or IM exists, you should obtain a copy and review it thoroughly before making a decision.
AdviceTech. As if it wasn't enough to be across TMDs, Alpha, Beta, Rule of 72 and all the other nuances of financial advice. Now, advisors are expected to be across all the technology options too, and there's so many of them. But never fear, Peita D is here. Join me each week on a journey of discovery through the software and apps on offer for advisors and advice businesses. So let's dive in, fellow advice explorers.
This episode is proudly brought to you by Netwealth. For over 21 years, Netwealth has provided market-leading technology, excellent customer support, and expertise to help wealth businesses thrive. As the financial advice landscape changes, it's important to embrace new technology to enhance the way you run your business. With change comes your chance to use advanced technology, reshape your client experience, and see wealth differently. Visit the website to learn how Netwealth can support your advice and wealth business.
Hello and welcome to the XY AdviceTech podcast. I'm Peita Diamantidis, and this week we're going to deep dive into Netwealth's 2022 AdviceTech Report. So joining me here today is a believer in developing kids' financial literacy, an IPO survivor, the reason we call highlighter pens texters, and a ninja-level tech geek. Thank you so much for joining me on the show, Matt Heine. Woo!
Thanks, Peita. Great to be here. And that's definitely the best introduction I've ever received. So thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Well, you'll have the benchmark now. You can hand that out to people. I love it. Now, I'm keen to sort of dive into the report. It is something that I'm a big fan of. But I just wanted to get to know you, and the listeners get to know you a little better through your use of technology. So let's kick off with what your most used emoji is. Do you use emojis?
I do. I was actually talking about this the other day because my colleagues were commenting on how I'm an overuser of emojis. They're fantastic, and given that you gave me 30 seconds heads up that this question was coming, I did cheat, and I just had a look at my most used emojis on my mobile phone. I was a bit surprised actually. There's quite a few of them. Strong arm that gets a lot of views.
Okay, nice.
The clap. I find that I'm congratulating people quite often. The detective, I can't remember in what context I was using that particular one, but I'm big on the thumbs up, so that's probably my most used one.
Fair enough. That's a common answer, that one. And what about if you just and I mean, asking you or I this question is probably tough because we live with our smartphones on at all times. But if you had to delete everything off the smartphone and just keep 3 apps, which 3 would you keep?
Yeah, good question as well. I think I'm up to about page 11 on my apps. I tend to download many most weeks. If I had to only leave 3, and this is going to make me sound like a big geek, I would keep the AFR. That is just something that I'm religious about. It's one of the first that I look at in the morning, even at the moment with the headlines. Yep. Clearly the Netwealth app. Couldn't live without that one. And I think probably my emails.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, function. Right? Raw function. I like it. All right. So let's dive into the most recent AdviceTech Insights sort of report. Now, for the listener, if you haven't come across the Netwealth AdviceTech Report, then, well, you must have been living under a rock. But still, I would highly suggest that you head over to the link in the show notes, as it serves as a huge resource. So it can be something of a wish list or a place to start list when you're considering new tech for your business. And it also gives you a really good peek at where the most tech-driven practices are sort of focusing into the future. So it's sort of a must read for me each year. But I thought before we dive in, we might take a bit of a look at what triggered you guys to start doing it. This is the 5th year, right, of the report?
The 5th or the 6th year, yes, that's correct. Yeah.
So what started you producing the report, given you're not actually a tech, well, I know that you might view you guys as a tech provider, but in terms of doing the AdviceTech Report, what triggered that?
Yeah, so it obviously goes back quite some time now. And really, if you think back 6-7 years ago, technology was starting to become pretty prevalent in not only our daily lives, but also clearly in our business lives.
Yeah.
And as we were looking around the industry and talking to advisors, it became pretty apparent that it was incredibly fragmented. And when we were starting to develop our own products and think about our roadmap and what the future might look like, we started to map out, what are the different technologies that are being used in the industry, what would the potential integration points be? And as we went down that rabbit hole, we got deeper and deeper, and it's turned into a report that's now become in many ways a bit of an industry staple year on year, and been incredibly well received. But it's an invaluable document and process for us as a business, and it's also all about us giving back to the industry. So where we can help educate advisors or give them a bit of a nudge along on their tech adoption journey, we're always very happy to help. And each year we draw incredible insights from it.
And I think even I took a bit of a peek back and you can even see reflected in the tech the evolution from sort of the big players like the big institutions or deal groups defining what tech and what happens through to now where it is a bit more accessible to the small practices. They can make choices that are just for them. And I think you can see that in the report and what people are focusing in on and what they're, implementing. It's not quite the one big institution defining where the money gets spent, in advice tech, which is a bit exciting.
Absolutely. If you look back 5 or 6 years, AdviceTech really, when advisors thought about it, was their financial planning software and a platform. And then there was just such a proliferation of technology that people started to get quite considered and interested in just all the different parts that could be automated. And it might have been, thinking back to even some of the conferences we've been on when Zapier first hit the market, yes. Just it opened up people's eyes to the possibilities of what they could actually do from not only a business efficiency perspective, but also from a client engagement perspective and delivering better services more real time to their end client.
Yeah, and what's exciting about that too for me is look, big institutions struggle to react to needs or demands from either advisors or the consumer, whereas once, small practices or just, advice practices realise what they can do with tech, then they can be more nimble. There's probably 1 or 2 people making that decision, not a committee of 30. So that to me is really exciting too, because we can respond to what's going out in the marketplace.
And it was quite exciting to see some of the more progressive licensees actually realising that trend very early on. And as we know, everyone's incredibly business. Technology doesn't naturally come to many people. So a number of the progressive licensees that we were working with actually took it upon themselves to start looking out into the marketplace and trying to make sense of what the tech stack could look like, but also taking a very flexible approach to realise that it was more than just a planning software and platform discussion. It was far, far broader. Yeah.
And like you say, it's gone beyond just because of the way we all interact with technology. And, each year you sort of have the key themes, the things that stand out from the data you've collected. And I can see that there's, a particular point this year that's really drawing out that human side of technology. It's become more than just, numbers and us using it sort of inwardly. It's something that's really about how the public use it. And I'm betting even how advisors use the technology. Is that right? Is that what stood out?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that stood out this year, which we'll do a bit of a deep dive on, but it was particularly pleasing because we've been doing this report for a long time, as you mentioned, and for quite a few years there we saw really high intentions, people wanting to do things, but no one actually doing anything. And then really through COVID, when people were stuck in their bedrooms and had a little bit more time to think about these things, but also had a real aha moment when things didn't work, we started to see these intentions converting into action. And for us, that's been really pleasing and satisfying to know that people are actually thinking about these things more broadly and then actually doing something about them. But from a people perspective or a human side, one of the key areas of focus at the moment, which just reflects the broader macro environment that we're in, is how do we use technology, or how do we understand how technology impacts our staff? So we're all struggling to find staff. We're all struggling to retain staff, whether it's the great resignation or the great reshuffle. We need to be conscious of everything that we're doing within our businesses. And no one wants to come to work and have to deal with crappy tech. We've got enough things going on without having to work through laboriously, poor UX or UIs. And we expect these days that, in the same way that our lives operate and social media integrates with everything else that we're doing, that the technology we're using at work is equally seamless and in many cases also enjoyable.
It really is the team's use of tech. I think we underrate how demoralizing it is when it's just difficult to use, and that it's like consistent torture because they're going into it all day, every day, and they know when they turn up tomorrow, they're going to have to do it again, and so really investing some energy into even how you choose and then roll out new technology is so important because it can, and we've experienced this in our practice, it can transform the morale and energy of the business, whereas I think historically, I think a lot of practices, unlike I'm sure with you and your business is much larger, where you really do consider these things as quite a project, right? That's natural in bigger businesses. In small businesses, I reckon there's I saw this at a conference. That looks cool. Let's implement. And that's about as far as it gets. And change management is so important, right?
Change management's what it's all about. But you'd be surprised. So, the research at the moment would suggest that, the best advice firms are using about 17 different bits of technology, and the industry average is about 14. But look, I love trying out new tech, using new tech. But I've got to say, every time we need to introduce new technology, whether it's a new HR system, learning system, workflow system, whatever it might be, it can be really hard work. And it's the last thing that many people want to do is to come in and learn a new system as logging in. Where do I go to find what? What do I actually need to do? How do I prove something? It can be a massive waste of time and, as you say, quite demoralizing. So that change management piece, getting people involved in the process early with the selection, and then having really solid training plans, and more importantly, actually carving out time throughout the week to have training sessions, because we can't magically create more time than there really is, and people are busy and don't necessarily want to be learning these things at 6 or 7 o'clock at night or first thing in the morning.
Absolutely. And look, we've found even, repetition is necessary. 6 months later, let's revisit that early training we did on this piece of tech, like just constantly revisiting and re-looking at it. We've sort of taken an approach, and this isn't for the tiny little apps we might try out, but a big choice is we treat it like it's a recruitment. So we go through as much structure as you would to both select, narrow down a list, recruit, and then even performance manage a new person. We do that with big pieces of tech just because it sort of makes it that real. Because a good piece of tech is like a person. They become like a great resource in your business. So, I love that you guys are drawing that out for staff, because I think, if anything, there's a whole core of people in the industry, the support staff, that could be paraplanners or admin, and I think they're generally a little unloved. And if we can roll out great tech, it's going to make their lives so much easier.
Absolutely. And I think there's also a risk that, firms are introducing new technology without going through that recruitment process, as you put it, to try and solve an individual problem without thinking about it more broadly and understanding how does it fit into the broader advice tech stack. How do we move data between the systems? And that can obviously lead to huge inefficiencies, but also real risk. So if you've got different data sitting in different systems that's incorrect or, not meant to be collected, such as TFNs, there is huge risk there.
There really is. I mean, and that's one of the things that came out of the report too, is this sort of rethinking the way we look at data as not an individual system-based thing, but across, a practice or even an industry. So talk me through what came out about the way people are looking at that differently and what their plans are for the next sort of 12 months.
Yeah, data is something that's core to what we're doing at the moment, and I think every business needs to be thinking about data in a very different way. It really is a firm's most valuable asset. So again, looking at the research, a number of firms across the industry from a number of years have been starting to think about data and how it might be used. Is it something that they can use internally for exception reporting, or trying to create efficiencies or deliver better client engagement and better client outcomes? But the challenge is that with 17 different technologies typically operating in one of these great firms, where do you start? How do you actually pull all of that data out, make sure that it's consistent and the same, so that you can then push it around the ecosystem? And our interest in this area has been now for many years. And that was a big part of the reason that we invested into Xeppo. And as it turns out, that was a really good decision. And certainly it's now looking like it's the most used data integration tool in the industry. So excuse the plug. It's what the research says, and it is externally audited. But, the best firms, so the AdviceTech firms, so that is firms that we've identified within the market that have got high profitability, high client satisfaction, high client engagement as a result of their technology usage, are already adopting this technology very deeply. And currently there's about 36 to I think 40% of AdviceTech stars using some sort of data integration solution. remarkably, in the next 12 to 24 months, that's going to jump to 76%. Ooh. So what that really says is if you're not thinking about it, it's going to become very hard to compete against these advice tech stars who are doing everything they can to use technology to their advantage.
And I think we often think, the data in this case might be either like product providers, so there might be some about the investments or things like that, or it might be something to do with our CRM, but there's so much more than that. To me, one of the key things that I really want to get a handle on is capacity. So what's the volume of activities that are going on? When are the peaks and troughs? Because we're all going to, like you said before, we're all going to struggle with hiring great people in the next little while, and you will be able to do that really well if you beautifully understand exactly what you need, as opposed to just doing what we all do all the time and, we'll just get a advisor or we'll just get a paraplanner. So I think the data we can draw out is about what gets completed, what doesn't, where the bottlenecks are, all that sort of stuff is the sort of dials or dashboard that we, would be fantastic for each business and really empower them to make the perfect next hire.
Yeah, and to that point, and again, I'll talk to Xeppo just because it's a system I understand pretty intimately. That's one of the recent enhancements we've just rolled out. So Xeppo basically integrates with about 35 different enterprise solutions. So it goes in there, so Xplan, Midwinter, Class, BGL, all the mortgage origination platforms, as well as workflow systems, etc. So it's got a very, very broad set of data. Each night it goes in, reaches into those various systems, pulls the data out, groups it, matches it, so that you can then create a single client file across all of those different systems. Importantly, it'll raise exceptions. So if you've got date of births different, between Class and Xplan, for example, it'll flag that there's a discrepancy in the data, and that goes extremely deep. Yeah. But it also looks at, to your point, things like activity. It looks at revenue. So through a set of very neat dashboards, advisors for the first time can really start to understand, okay, well, what is my revenue per client group or family group? How does that compare to prior corresponding periods? What are the services that they're buying? Have I provided them with FDSs and the ROAs, et cetera, that they might need? And then we now benchmark that. So you can start to see, how does your individual metrics compare against the broader industry? So are you running more or less clients than the broader industry? How does your revenue per client group for a particular size rate? So you start to get down and really understand how your business is tracking against all of those key metrics using data from a very, very broad range of solutions. So things have really accelerated in the last couple of years, and it's just great to see the direction it's all heading.
Yeah, and the connection of those data points can be so powerful, because I think, what might be the case is you've got a team of advisors and you might look at, say, revenue per advisor as a really simple metric, but, one might have, say, a slower time to turn around, or they might get through fewer, but their clients are actually stickier. So it's being able to combine those data points and really see a sort of matrix for that advisor, as opposed to some, what seems like black and white data, but it needs to be given context, and so that's what I love about that sort of overarching data look, is it's context, it's depth to the data, its meaning, as opposed to just, is it more or less, which doesn't really add that much value.
And that's the next horizon for us and the teams working on it. We want to be able to prove that all the things that we're talking about actually add value. So, for example, let's look at profitability per advisor or per practice, where they use a managed account for some clients or all of their clients or none of them. Let's look at things like client engagement and all this, the work that we're doing around client portals. Is it actually adding value, or is it just something that we've cooked up in the background based on the feedback that we're getting that may or may not be right? So actually statistically proving a lot of the things that we're talking about, and then allowing you to slice and dice that data and benchmark it against the cohorts that you want.
Nice. And so you mentioned client portals. So client engagement was another sort of key theme that came out of the report. To me, actually, the number of advisors even looking into getting client portal, that ratcheted up significantly. That was interesting. It was probably a bit faster than I might have expected.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a result of COVID. So as we know, particularly us Victorians, we spent a lot of time at home, and all of our lives moved online for everything, whether it was shopping, art classes, gym classes. And within that, most of the activities we were participating in were actually done via our mobile. So the actual tech adoption by all age groups, even the older age groups, was very significant. And we often talk about this acceleration of adoption, and we're probably 5 to 10 years ahead of where we may have been had COVID not happened. And I guess the outcome of that from a client perspective is that, and interestingly, when we're talking to the advisable Australians, when they're looking for an advisor, their use of technology is actually part of their consideration set. So they want to know that their advisor actually has a digital way of interacting with them because as we've probably talked about before, believe it or not, no one enjoys signing paperwork. So little things like that, and I often joke the biggest innovation in fin services is the digital signature. Clients are actually looking for a lot more than that. Their last best experience was with a social media platform typically, or Netflix, or one of the other streaming services. And they're highly personalised, really seamless, frictionless experiences. And that's what they expect from all of their providers, whether it's financial services or a social media company.
Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing about client portals that we've been looking to this too is I think all of us are also sick of having so many channels that we need to be aware of to try and interact, even me as an individual, let alone as an advisor. And I think the beauty of a portal is you can start to have that window that the client knows that's the way to get a hold of you. That's the ideal channel. And it can be used in lots of different ways. They don't just have to be into chat. It can be all sorts of things, but it's just that consistent channel, and it can cut through the noise of all the others. I mean, we're now at the point where both email and SMS are so spammed, it's becoming impossible to get through to people. So we need a direct channel. I don't think we've got a choice, really.
There is nothing worse than getting spammed by SMS. It's my biggest bugbear. And I agree with that. Everyone's getting smashed by information across every channel. And a key point of difference, or really a benefit for an advisor in the future, is being that curator of information and driving them to a portal where they know and they can trust that the information that they're getting has actually had oversight, if you like. Because, again, you pick up the fin today and, clearly markets overnight have been disastrous, but the headlines amplify that, and it's not productive for an advice relationship, and it creates anxiety and uncertainty and all the emotions that everyone listening would be aware of. So, using a client portal, there is so much utility, and really, as a business and as advisors, it's about thinking about what are the multiple touch points that we can deliver on a digital basis, not to replace advice or face-to-face, but to augment it and create a self-service environment that is effectively 24/7, where it could be that you're delivering daily news, broadcast emails, market updates. It could be document signing. It could be that they just want to check on their mortgage repayments, their portfolio, or just chat to you to see how things are going. So there's so many things that can be done and effectively centralised through a branded environment that strengthens that relationship. It's a bit of a no-brainer moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. And I think for all of us, what we've noticed is we've been watching the cost of advice in the practice from day dot, but particularly in the last few years. And while the production of advice has always been a focus, what I'm now seeing is that admin or follow-ups is costing us more than the advice is right now. So to me, anything that helps cut through for the client to just get them to act quickly because it's right in their hand, and they go, yep, nope, or sign, like anything like that, because it's not that they're avoiding doing it. It's just that they're busy. We all are. So anything that cuts through that, I think, can massively reduce the extent of that sort of mindless follow-up activity that can go on in a practice, which I think we've probably all experienced over the last little while. One of the other client engagement things that was interesting to me in the report was the presentation tools. That took a bit of a hype too, didn't it? And I mean, I love the idea that maybe more advisors are using things like Canva, which a whole lot of them wouldn't have even known what it was, a few years ago. So that's a bit exciting.
Yeah, it's certainly changed. And again, I think a lot of this comes back to that sort of need to deliver more interactive, personalised reviews online. So clearly during COVID again, it wasn't possible to sit down with a client and do a page turn. So things went online. And I think when you put a PDF online, you realise just potentially how dull it can be.
Yeah.
And so what are the things that can be done, whether it's videos, GIFs, audio files, or just even the ability to drill down and do reviews online that are more interactive. And clearly that's now being picked up across the industry. And I agree. Canva is a very easy tool to use. Clearly it's been very successful, and it just adds that element of customization and in many cases fun to a review.
And any listeners that haven't checked out Canva, I mean, they have marketing professionals that design templated presentation tools that people use to get VC funding. Like these things are designed to have impact, to engage. And so, why would we try and do that ourselves? That's nuts. Use the tools that we have sort of available to us.
And just on that one, the other key point, and this is not necessarily related to the AdviceTech Report, it's just how humans absorb information. That's the other key part that came out of the presentation area, which was that we need to recognise people absorb information differently. Some people are oral, or they prefer to receive information through an audible means, but also most people are visual. So that ability to think about information, whether it's through infographics or just better charting and more visual graphs, and then supporting it with the detail for those that want to delve into it, really important. And trying to understand your clients and have that conversation with them so that in future, again, you can personalise reviews to their needs and outcomes. I was chatting to an advisor the other day. This particular one operates in the family office, high net worth space, and they spend most of their time actually on their review packs, to the point where some of the older clients or the matriarchs, patriarchs, they have specific requirements around the fonts that are used, the font size, the colours. Wow. And it sounds ridiculous. And it's not just that they've got nothing else to complain about. It's that to them, it's really important. But very few of us actually ask our clients, how do you want to receive this information? Do you want War and Peace, or do you just want a quick summary? Do you understand the information I'm giving you? All those sort of things.
Absolutely. And I think I'd love every listener to really, do some digging and understand what an infographic truly is, because we've been producing graphs in our industry for years, decades even, that take 5 minutes to describe. And if you need to describe and run the client through the graph, it is failing. It's not
Correct.
Doing its job. So whereas an infographic is designed for a snapshot, immediate message, that you can just look at it immediately, understand what it means and what it's trying to tell you. So I think if more of us could try and understand that and deliver things that way, we'd find the cut through would be massive. So the client portal thing came up in engagement. Clearly at Netwealth specifically, you've been investing in that as a tool that, advisors can take advantage of for their clients. I mean, there's apps for platforms and, clients can see their balances and all that sort of stuff. How does the Netwealth portal go beyond that? What did you guys, and what's on the radar that you want to put in the portal to sort of really take advantage of the insights you've got from the report?
Yes, this is a trend we identified a few years ago, and it was pretty clear what was happening in the mobile space. So we started to work through what our strategy was, and potentially slightly altruistic in its approach, but we wanted to create a bit of technology that was independent of the Netwealth platform, and we felt that was really important if we were going to be successful and have the adoption that we're starting to see. So what we've built out is a bit of technology that can be white labeled, so it's fully native for Android and iOS. We delivered it initially with the typical sort of platform information, so you can log in using your face and all those sort of important security features to get your portfolio. But we set out to design it so that it was a bit more engaging than just I guess your portfolio and basic information. So we had to design something that we felt was going to appeal to the millennials, or the millennials with money, the emerging affluent, as well as the established affluent. So those older clients that also had significant portfolio value. So trying to straddle both of those markets and get something appealing to both was quite a design challenge, but we feel we got there. And then it was important that we started to, referring back to our discussion earlier, think about and build out the other things that people might want to do within that financial app outside of just looking at their portfolio, because we recognise that that's not something people should necessarily be doing every day or every week. And many people might actually, in fact, only do it each year when they get their annual statement. So what else can we do to bring people back into the app to create that engagement model? So we introduced bank feeds, so you can link through about 170 different institutional feeds, including frequent flyer points and afterpay balances, all of the banking and debt, which you'll be able to link through to your property. We've just gone live with property feeds in the desktop, and that'll be going into the mobile in the next couple of weeks, where you can link through to domain, and it'll pull through all of the information, so pictures, valuations, which you can override if you don't agree. And at the end of October, we'll be introducing the ability to link all of the data collected from within Xeppo into the mobile app. So what that means for a firm that uses Netwealth and one of the other platforms, they can use a consistent digital experience and interface for all of their clients, regardless of the platform that they use. And that was really important to us, because we understand and recognise that whilst it'd be fantastic, a practice isn't going to use entirely Netwealth. There's always reasons, whether it's through a transition or tax or just different feature set, that a practice will use 2 or 3 platforms. So being able to support all of the platforms, bringing your banking, and also your property and also things like over time Xero and MyOb data, so you can look at your financial data and firm-wide documents. So that's all in place or getting very close. Beyond that, all the things that we talked about, so chat, document vaults, document signing, they're all very much on the roadmap, as well as the ability to set tasks and workflow and have real-time consent and digital consent.
Yeah, and I think, clients need us to nag. A lot of clients just need us to nudge and nag. But if that can be an alert on their phone, that is a cut through that you just can't achieve any other way. It's just, it's so powerful. So I think for all it seems like a small thing, being able to set the client to do as opposed to us is it's magic. I think that will make a world of difference for people, particularly if they can then immediately act. If they can do that within the app, that's powerful. And I think the other thing I'd say, with the combination of, say, the Netwealth feed, but then bank feeds is these sort of things are really exciting to us because we're like, that's fantastic. The thing is, the public think that's what is possible already. That's the problem with some of these innovations is they're like, well, do you mean you couldn't do that before? So, it's great that they're coming, but it's just something they're like, oh, well, of course. I mean, yes, and they don't understand a lot of their bank, even their bank apps won't do that sort of thing, so they can't see everything in one place. So I love that if they can't do it with a bank app, at least they can with their investment or super, that it'll be able to capture everything else. So I think that's a real win for the client.
I still love that moment though when we show it to some of our clients, and it's almost like magic when all this information suddenly appears within the one portal. But you're right, it's become a bit of an expectation, and we're certainly not trailblazing in that regard. But we felt that it was an important foundational feature that was almost a must-have before we could really sort of take on and tackle the client portal market.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. So in terms then of, was there any other standouts in terms of the report that you wanted to cover, things that were like those big themes that stood out for this year?
So data integration and data integration technology, huge. We've talked about mobile and client engagement, very significant. The other one, and I don't want this to sound like an ongoing advertisement for Netwealth, but managed accounts are having just incredible growth and have become increasingly mainstream. And what we see is every time there's volatility or market corrections, the level of inquiries for managed accounts tends to spike when people look back and say, that is the last time I ever want to have to generate hundreds of ROAs or whatever it might be to change client portfolios, which then take me 3 weeks to implement when it could have been done effectively overnight. Yeah. So we saw some incredible outcomes off the back of the COVID volatility and the more recent volatility where portfolio managers were meeting effectively daily, looking at overnight data, making rapid changes, de-risking portfolios across all clients. So it's very equitable, and then also taking advantage of opportunities on the way up. So managed accounts, I think, are expected to rise to about 60% adoption across the market in the next 12 to 24 months, and currently sitting at 45, but with the AdviceTech stars and more professional firms and integrated firms having already adopted and very much on their managed account journey.
Yeah, exciting. And that's sort of, you've got multiple layers then. It's the client focus, it's the staff, it's the internal efficiencies. There's multiple layers there, which is fabulous. And that's how we'll get a real sort of evolution of how we do things, is when it covers, all of them. Well, I'm sort of curious then, as we sort of lead into wrapping up then, you've been, like me, a bit of a tech geek for a long time, and you've been looking forward or trying to look forward for advice for some time. What do you see as the thing you're really curious about that bit further out? What's the thing that seems like that's the next exciting thing that we can all sort of look forward to or implement?
So there's a lot of things happening in the industry. Personally, I'm really excited to see a lot of the initiatives that we've been working on over the last 4 or 5 years coming together into a really cohesive environment. So for me, that's really exciting, and I think in the next 6 to 12 months we'll be in an incredible position to really help advisors drive efficiency, staff engagement, but also the client engagement. The bit that I'm intrigued and very curious about at the moment, and I've just finished a very long-winded article in the Fin about the advice review at the moment. It's just where that's going to end up. There is talk at the moment about scrapping a best interest duty, scrapping SOAs, scrapping ROAs, and effectively providing an environment whereby anyone working within a financial institute can give advice. So, this is serious, and the implications are very wide-ranging. And a big part of that is just digital advice. What does that actually mean do clients want to do it themselves? Are they still looking for a coaching relationship? Is it about, again, augmenting the advice relationship? Where does that actually go? And I think, clearly there's a lot of work to be done. In many ways, whilst a lot of this is great news for the industry, there's going to be a huge amount of work to implement any of these changes. So sometimes the removal of legislation is as disruptive as the introduction of legislation, but it appears to be heading in the right direction. And ultimately, if we can lower the cost to serve, lower the cost to advice, and provide advice to more Australians, that's an awesome outcome.
Yeah, and I think, losing some of those handcuffs that I feel maybe the industry has been restrained by, I think is exciting. I'm with you on that. But, this is I've built a house and it's so ugly, I've decided I'm going to knock it down and build it again. That's still a horrible process. Like, you can't underrate that it's hard enough doing it once, let alone deciding to wipe the thing out and start again. So I, as a practice owner, I'm wary of how difficult that'll be, and that it'll be a bit retread. That's the other frustration, isn't it? Is that, like, we've done all this effort, we're going to be doing it again, clearly. So that's hard not to get a little frustrated about.
Totally. And having spent way too much time and way too much resources, even on things like fee consent and fee renewal last year, to read that might be on the chopping block is in many ways fantastic news, but my God.
Where do I send that bill? Yeah,
exactly. And it's interesting for us, and no doubt everyone listening, there's a whole heap of stuff that we're working on around, digitising ROAs and all the rest of it. Do we stop that work, or do we push ahead with it on the basis this could take a long time and there's a lot of water to go under the bridge? And I think, unfortunately, it's probably the latter, because this could go in any direction. I think it has the potential to become very politicized as well.
Yeah, and I think the unfortunate part of all of us is it's just more uncertainty. And I think that's probably what we're all a bit done with. I think change is great. I mean, you and I probably are at the top end of really enjoying that process, but I think uncertainty is difficult, and it's difficult to sustain managing that. So I'm with you. I'm sort of powering along with the view that there may be some new news down the track, but hey, we've just got to continue as is, because who knows how long it'll take, but I have to admit, one of the things that, and I don't know whether you've played with much at all, VR was touted for some years, it's been touted as sort of the next best thing. And I've always struggled a bit, nobody really wants to look at a graph in 3D, right? I mean, that's just not going to engage a consumer, but I'm excited to see whether anybody sort of takes it down the goals path, where somebody could be looking at their future and then based on scenarios, it grays out, almost like, that thing you wanted to do, no, that's not possible. So it sort of grays, that sort of thing, where you make what the choices they're making really tangible. So I don't know whether you've seen anything like that out there, or on your, South by Southwest jaunt and all the sort of things you're doing. Is anybody getting really clever with VR, or is it still a bit of a gamer's paradise and that's the only way it's being used?
I actually went and bought myself an Oculus at the start of the year for this exact reason. I had to understand where it was going, what it all meant. Also, I was really interested in what it means for the future of work, because in the same way that we're now on a Zoom call or a Riverside call, if people do continue to work remotely, which they will, is there a better way to actually engage in a 3D world? I think having a meeting or an executive or a board meeting with avatars is probably still a little way off. I think it provides some interesting opportunities for advisors when delivering reviews to their clients remotely, because it could be a far more interactive experience where you sit around a virtual table in your choice of location. So it might be that you do want to have a meeting in Hawaii, and then you've got these incredible resources at your fingertips almost, where you can point to the wall and pull up different scenarios and graphs that are far more interactive. Your example, though, is actually one that I presented on probably 5-6 years ago now, which was exactly that. So you work through a risk profile and you show the scenario outcomes of taking on different types of risks. So your risk profile says you need to be a high risk to get to the objective that you want, which is drinking champagne on a ship. Unfortunately, you've also suggested you're very conservative, and the thought of investing into anything other than a term deposit makes you anxious, and therefore that large P&O ship that you're wanting to go on might be more like a tugboat going down the canals of somewhere less exotic. But actually being able to visualize that, and there was some great research done, and I think they've actually implemented it to try and help people quit smoking and drinking. And they basically simulated what their faces and their bodies would look like if they continued at the rate that they were. And I think when you end up staring back at yourself and it had the with smoking and without smoking visual, it's pretty confronting, and it actually changed people's behaviours very significantly. So there's no reason that can't be done. The Oculus is pretty uncomfortable. I think the hardware needs to get better. But look, I think it's not here tomorrow. It's probably not next year, but at some point in the future, we'll see some really interesting use cases. Yeah,
and I think particularly if you can, like you're saying, not replicate reality in virtual reality. It's like, no, it needs to be better. It needs to be, even to attend conferences. Like, why wouldn't I fly in on the Millennium Falcon as part of the VR experience? Don't make me walk through a conference center, So I think that's where we've sort of got to let our imagination go. And I think that's how we can really sort of, lift the energy about it. We've covered a lot. So is there anything else we've missed? Anything else you wanted to highlight?
I'm sure there is, but I'm also conscious that all of this stuff's like drinking from a fire hydrant. So having complained about the amount of information everyone's receiving earlier, why don't we leave it at that?
Perfect. All right, Advice Explorers, if you'd like to find out more about the AdviceTech Report and Netwealth's client portal, then the website links are going to be in the episode show notes, along with Matt's LinkedIn details. If you want to, stalk him and nudge him about some things you might want out of
please do.
Netwealth, then please reach out. Look, I hope you, the listener, got some value out of sort of hearing us geek out over the future of technology, and this is what happens when you get two tech geeks, with mics. We're always going to go a bit longer and get excited about the nerdiness, but look, thank you so much for joining us, Matt, and for Netwealth supporting the first season of the XY Advice Tech podcast.
Pleasure. Good to be involved.
So, have you already checked out the 2022 Netwealth Advice Tech Report, or perhaps you even utilise a client portal like Netwealth or the others out there? Maybe do you agree or disagree with our discussion? So, either way, please share your insights on the XY platform, as I'd love to hear your take, along with, what tech really caught your eye in the report. There's a lot of detail there, and there's even sort of 3 sections of the report you can download separately. So there's a lot to digest, but I'd really encourage you to take that time. Now, in terms of sort of my thoughts on it, then this report is a really great example of where your curiosity muscle that we've sort of been developing over these episodes will come into play. So perhaps before you even take a look at the report, give yourself just like 5 minutes to brainstorm what areas you feel need an upgrade in your business. Maybe areas you feel would lift operations or the client experience or your effectiveness. Just some bullet points. Really just get you thinking down on paper. Think about maybe the short or medium term, and then even in the longer term. Then read through the AdviceTech Report and take a look at the trends, but also sort of just trust your gut on and see what really catches your eye in the report. What are the things that stand out? What are the things that seem like hold on, I think that could be something that could really resolve that challenge we're facing or that opportunity we want to take. So then take a look back at the list you made at those immediate needs and see if some of the tech you're both curious about might also meet the need, right? So we're starting to sort of align both the things that we're interested in that catch our eye and the things we know should be a focus in the business. And to Matt's point, give some real thought as to how they might roll out and add further value down the track. Think about the bigger picture, think about where this is taking you. And feel free to also just make a wish list or a, curious app list as well. Something you can go back to later of the apps or even the tech categories that you might want to check out when you sort of got a moment and it's a bit quieter. It might be later in the year or the beginning of a new year and you want to check a few more things out and get your energy up. So make one of those lists so that you can just add things to it and you won't miss them. Now, as we've been talking about successfully implementing technology, how do you roll it out with your staff? What are the change management techniques you need? Then for today's Curiosity Corner, I'm going to bring to your attention a little app I've come across that does one specific thing really well. For this week's Curiosity Corner, I'd love you to check out Tango. Now, you'll find it at tango.us.us. And basically, their tagline is document what you're doing instantly. This is basically a free browser extension that actually generates these gorgeous step-by-step guides while you're doing something you want to explain to somebody else. Yeah. So basically you turn Tango on and you just complete the process that you're trying to capture. And Tango documents your step-by-step actions with automatic screenshots and written instructions. It does all of that for you. Then once you've completed the task, then you can trim, you can revise it a bit, you can even finalize, your new step-by-step workflow description. You can add text descriptions, you can blur some stuff out, and you can annotate it to your heart's content. And then you're able to either create a link so somebody can look at it directly. You can download it as a PDF, you can copy and paste it, or you can even embed it in existing documents, maybe a learning management system, a wiki, or even a team chat, So this is fantastic for getting new hires up to speed really fast, right? Because it's every step you take to do something. It can massively improve productivity for you and your team because the ninja tips, the team can just quickly do the ninja tip and then share it with the team. And you can even empower customers with some self-serve sort of resources. So showing them how to click on things, showing them how to click, through a portal, showing them how to, all that sort of thing can be captured for those that like to see, or maybe even print out and have something next to them as they're trying it for the first time. So look, Tango is well worth a look, and I'd love to hear what you think of it. Well, that's all we've got for this week. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you'll get your AdviceTech fix automatically sent to you each week. And if you'd like a speaker at your next event to brief your audience on how they too can become bionic advisors, then please reach out to me on LinkedIn /PeitaMD. That's PEITAMD. Otherwise, I'll look forward to turning up in your earbuds next week. And remember, Advice Explorers, stay curious.